the discipline through which we prepare for a meeting is going to generally dictate the success or even how we measure the success coming out of it. And I'm going to tell you a story that illustrates what probably happens to many of us at some point in our careers when we're preparing for a big event, for our big Super Bowl meeting, whatever it might be. It could be a big active deal you're working, you could have a big executive coming into town to help you sell. And you prepare for that meeting, think about the preparation you did for that meeting, especially earlier in my sales career when we didn't have the benefit of Google to do searches or LinkedIn to look at profiles of our target audience. We had to do the old-fashioned library style of research. And we would gear up and learn as much as we could about that company, about those individual executives we were calling on, and come into that meeting armed with that background. But in the absence of a plan, the analogy would be if you're preparing for the actual Super Bowl and you're going to go play the New England Patriots. You could know everything about their tendencies, about the kind of plays that Belichick runs, about Tom Brady's tendencies. But that knowledge in and of itself is useless unless you have a game plan to do something about it. And that's what sales call planning is all about, is having a game plan. Another recollection I'll ask you to go through here is think about your childhood days, or even if you have children, and perhaps a more direct applicable experience for those of us who are parents, is think about children as the best raw talent salespeople that you ever experience in your lives. Meaning, first of all, they are innately curious. So how many times have your children asked you an open-ended question that gets you talking and oftentimes even stumbling, trying to think of a rational answer to offer them? And even when you think you give them a good response, they're going to ask you what? They're going to ask why. Why? And that's extremely powerful, because to the extent that you can ask someone why and they're continuing to expose to you their rationale, you do that in a sales setting, and what the customer or the prospect is exposing to you is their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, basically what it is that's going to get them to buy. So that's one thing children are very good at, and we got to get back to those roots. Somewhere in our adult lives, we abandon that. The other thing kids are good at is closing. In fact, they are relentless closers. And if your kids are anything like my children, they will close you early and often. As Alec Baldwin said in his landmark performance in Glengarry Glen Ross, always be closing. That's what my children are doing to me. From my youngest, who's saying, Dad, are you going to buy me the ice cream cone? And it's, even if I'll give in and say yes, it's when are you going to buy me the ice cream cone? Or even after that, when am I going to get the cotton candy? So they are focused on their needs, but they're relentless at framing it in an action that you've either got to say yes or no to. And if you say no, do they take that for an answer? No, of course not. They're going to keep working you. So think of a call planning framework that incorporates those things, that is actually a game plan, that focuses on our innate curiosity, meaning we can frame getting some information from the prospect, and then is focused on actions at the end, that we're going to close them on something. And the framework that we've developed, and this is back to my early days, even earlier in my career at Oracle, is what we call a AAA plan. And the AAA plan, as you would guess, there's 3 letters there. The acronym AAA is for answers, attitudes, and actions. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each of them and give you some illustrations as to what form this can take, and even an exercise you can do with your teammates as you're preparing either during a sales meeting or an actual live planning session for an upcoming important meeting or conference call with a customer to make this productive for you. The beauty of the AAA planning process is it shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes to incorporate the research you've already gathered. I'm sure you know a lot about the prospects on whom you're calling. It's a hell of a lot easier today to do that and gather that detail than it was decades ago. But making it purposeful in the context of a plan requires you to focus on, first of all, the A, answers. What does that mean? As the name suggests, we're going to gather some answers from that customer. This is where being innately curious comes in handy. Asking really effective, open-ended questions. You can't ask a yes-no question. Like, is maximizing profitability or return on investment important for you this quarter? What executive is going to say no to that? You got to say yes. But there's an awkward silence after that. So you want to frame open-ended questions where you're going to get that prospect talking about how is it that you're going to look to optimize ROI, or in my market space, return on ad spending or online conversion rates this quarter or this year. Asking a question of how or why gets the customer to start expanding and telling you a more rich story, the tapestry of which you're going to weave into a solution that you're ultimately going to come back and propose to them. So that's a really important and reason that's the first A, is that the answers set the tone for the rest of the discussion. So we'll come back to that and giving it a structure and a framework, but that's the first A, is answers. The second A is attitudes. So what attitudes might that prospect have or customer that we either need to change or absent attitudes that we need to insert? Could be an attitude about us, could be an attitude about the industry, about this solution category, could be an attitude about the urgency from their own point of view of this initiative that you're there to talk about. And in fact, if it's a low priority, you want them to have the attitude, this is a high priority. Another example of an attitude you want them to have by the end of the meeting, which is what these attitudes are about, is that, wow, this particular partner would be the safe decision for us. This is the best route we could go to maximize ROI. Or this is the most experienced partner we could hire in this category in our industry. Because look at the examples they gave us of all these other companies like us who they're helping achieve success. So that's an attitude. Again, that second A attitude is the attitude you want the customer, the audience, to have as a function of having had that discussion by the end of the discussion. Not surprisingly, the third, and I would argue the probably most important closing process in any discussion, is that third A, and that's actions. So what actions are we going to get this customer, the prospect, to agree to take? And this is the analogy, again, of your children badgering you for that ice cream cone, for that cotton candy. Not only are you going to give it to me, but when am I going to get it? So get back to those roots as a kid, getting in touch with what you want out of this meeting, and not letting the prospect get an easy out of just what I would call a grin session at the end of the meeting. How many of these discussions have you had where you have good momentum in the dialogue, you gather some good data, you've talked about some attitudes, you think you've even moved the dial on some attitudes, and at the end of the meeting, you stand up, you exchange pleasantries, you shake hands, and there's that awkward moment where, okay, I guess it's time for me to now walk out the door, and we're going to do something ill-defined and unbeknownst to us, some at a later date. That's not a successful closure. Successful closure is having, let's say, 2, 3, maybe as many as 4 or 5, but it's even powerful if you just have one item that you want to close that customer on. Something you're going to ask them to do. It's a specific, actionable request that they're either going to say no or yes to, and maybe they'll say, good idea, I don't know, I'll get back to you. But even that is better than having an ending to a discussion in the absence of closure. So examples of actions you could ask a customer to take. And I'll use examples from the enterprise software space in which I've been working my whole career. You could ask them to review the MSA that you've given to them and get a red line back from their legal organization. That, again, is something that if they say yes, it demonstrates a buying signal. They wouldn't be spending time on that, most likely, if they're not serious to some degree about doing business with you. You could get them to call references. You can get them to commit to making a corporate visit. You could get them to commit to taking a meeting or doing a pilot, or introducing you to other members of their organization and other departments. Even once you've already closed that particular customer, seeking introductions to other stakeholders within the company. These are all valuable things to close with that allow you to measure when you leave the room and when you then are huddling with your teammates afterwards. How often does this happen to you, where you get your team together and say, okay, great meeting. How'd you feel about it? Oh, it was great. The vibe was good. They gave us good information initially. We uncovered some pain we didn't know about. We think we changed their attitude about who's the best player in this industry that could satisfy their needs based on all those references. Okay, now what? And you kind of look at each other and go, yeah, but, and the reason you feel unfulfilled is if you haven't closed them on anything. The best way to measure the effectiveness of a meeting is go back to, let's say, that list of 4 items and say, okay, we asked them to review the MSA. Did they say yes? Yes, they agreed to do it. Okay, we asked them to do a corporate visit. Did they say yes? All right, great, they agreed to do it. We asked them to call these 3 references we gave them. All right, but they've only called 1, not sure when or if they're going to call the other 2. That's a little soft. We got to get back to that one, and so on. That's the way we can measure the effectiveness of a meeting, by running through the actions that we ask the customer to take and looking how many they've actually agreed to take. And you're not going to bat 1,000 in every one, but you need some measuring stick so that we figure out how far are we really from closure in the sales cycle. Now, here's a fun exercise that you can go through with your team, and not just in your sales meetings, where I think you can make this very engaging, but as a regular continuum as you run your business. Any sales call, any conference call, anytime you're bringing your teammates in to join you in a selling action, any step in a sales cycle, hold yourselves accountable to review your AAA plan before the meeting. Now, you'll fine-tune it, you'll optimize it, and the AAA shouldn't take any more than 10 to 15 minutes to create. In fact, if you're taking much more time than that, chances are you're listing too many questions, too many attitudes you're trying to change, and too many actions you're going to ask them to take. Because it's not a 20-question thing. You're not Charlie Rose conducting an interview on television. The customer's probably not going to give you the chance to ask that many questions. It's a bit like playing truth or dare. In fact, the truth is the questions, the dare are the actions. Think of it that way. Now, in the sales setting, sales meeting, let's say you're gathered together, your team, whether it's your annual kickoff or any gathering, that you want to make this a fun exercise to drive home the importance of and develop the skill set for fine-tuning and using a AAA plan as a sales call planning tool. I'd recommend this. Go around the room and in rapid fire succession, almost like a game show format, you can ask the team, start with the first A, answers. So in other words, we're going to ask questions, not close-ended questions, but open-ended questions. Go around until you get 3 legitimate open-ended questions that are actually reusable for the team. And you challenge everybody. You can even use a ding-ding or a buzzer if somebody asks a close-ended question and you want to buzz them out and look for 3. So you get 3. Then subsequently go around and look for 3 attitudes, some common attitudes a customer might have, oftentimes which are rooted in an objection, and you want to change their attitude about you as relates to that objection. Don't stop until you get 3 good ones. And then finally, and most importantly, go around the room soliciting feedback from the team to get 3 actions that you can close on. Chances are there's some variance, but not a lot of variance in the kinds of actions you're going to be asking your prospects to take in your sales cycles. I've just highlighted a few around following up on contract red lines, doing corporate visits, calling references, doing a site visit, doing a proof of concept, doing a pilot, introducing you to other stakeholders in that organization. Those are tangible steps that you can assign dates to that they'll either agree to or not. And if they say no to everything, it's a measuring stick and where you really are in the sales cycle compared to where you might thought you'd be. This is a framework that you can make a lot of fun, but the idea is no matter what your plan is, have one. Have a plan, give it a AAA format, hold your team accountable for reviewing them before every call. I guarantee you'll increase your close rates.